In 1975, 1.76 million wild Atlantic salmon returned home to Ireland. Last year, that number was less than 176,000. That is a 90% collapse in one human lifetime, and almost nobody in this country is talking about it. Today, I want to change that, because the question isn't whether or not our salmon are dying. They are. That is crystal clear. The question is who or what is causing this. And this is where it gets very complicated and very political. Stick around, because by the end of this video, if you don't already have an opinion on this, you will. And I promise you, someone in the comments is going to have something very different to say. Let me start with the big picture, because I don't think people truly understand the significance of this animal. The Atlantic salmon is arguably Ireland's most iconic wild creature. It appears in our mythology as the salmon of knowledge, the very fish that gave Finn McCool the knowledge of the world. It's on our coins, and it's woven into our rivers and our deep history. A history going back thousands and thousands of years. And right now, that very creature is on the edge of functional extinction. In April 2024, Dr. Cathal Gallagher, the then CEO of Inland Fisheries Ireland, stood in front of an Uachtaráis committee and used the word catastrophic. Only 27 of Ireland's 144 salmon rivers are considered not at risk. That is just 19%. That means 8 of every 10 salmon rivers in Ireland may not have enough fish in them to sustain themselves. And it's not just an Irish problem. Across the entire Northern Atlantic, wild Atlantic salmon have seen a 70% decline in the last few decades. The IUCN classified wild Atlantic salmon officially as endangered in Britain in 2023. Ireland hasn't received the formal designation yet. But look at the numbers and ask yourself honestly, what would you call it? Everyone agrees the salmon are dying. Almost nobody agrees on why. So let me walk you through every suspect, starting right here in our very own rivers. Let's start with the rivers themselves, because that's where a salmon starts its life. Salmon hatch in gravel very high up in a river system. They spend the first 2 to 3 years of their life in the rivers. But when a river's polluted, how is a salmon supposed to survive in it? If the water's polluted, the gravel is covered in algae bloom, or there's a dam blocking its path upstream, how is the salmon even supposed to make it to the ocean? Full stop. The Environmental Protection Agency published their water quality report from 2019 all the way up until 2024. Almost half, at 48%, of Ireland's freshwater ecosystems are considered unsatisfactory. And within that time frame, when they published it between 2019 and 2024, there were a recorded 142 fish kills. That is an average of 24 fish kills every year. And the biggest culprit? Agriculture. Nitrogen and phosphorus from farmland runs off into our rivers and smother the riverbeds. When too many nutrients enter a river system, you get algae blooms, oxygen depletion, and communities of invertebrate being absolutely destroyed. These are the very invertebrate that the young salmon depend on to survive. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not bashing farmers. I understand their significance. They provide the country with food, but the data is the data. Intensive agriculture near river catchments is one of the biggest killers of salmon in today's day and age. But it's not just pollution. Weirs, dams, and culverts are another culprit in this whole situation. They are literally stopping salmon from getting to their spawning grounds, and it's catastrophic. Inland Fisheries Ireland announced that they were going to be doing a €110 million investment into the stabilization of our river systems by the removal of weirs along many river systems. Hopefully this will open up migration routes. But just think about that for a second. A female salmon will travel thousands of miles from open ocean to get to a river system, guided by smell and a magnetic field, only to realize that it cannot get up the river because it has been blocked by a big slab of cement. So all of that survival for nothing. The freshwater problem is real. There are issues with our freshwater systems. But if Ireland decided to take action tonight, it could change tomorrow. So there is something we can do about that. There's something that is completely out of our hands though. And it brings me to my next point. Along Ireland's entire Atlantic coastline, from Donegal to Mayo to Cork, There are open net salmon farms, circular netted pens floating just offshore that are farming big salmon for our shelves in grocery stores. Now, these farms are a legitimate business. They do provide employment for many people, and they do really help our total economy. So I'm not here to say that salmon farming is inherently evil. It's not. But here's the problem. Those farms sit right in the way of migration routes for small salmon, or salmon smolts. Every spring, small salmon, young salmon, we call them smolts, make their magnificent journey out into the ocean. They're ready to leave the rivers and head out to the open sea to feed. They are small, they are vulnerable, and they are running a biological gauntlet. It's intense, you can imagine it. And in Ireland, many of them have to swim past these big open penned nets. Now, you're still probably wondering, well, what's the problem, Connor? The problem is that these farms are full and riddled with sea lice. Sea lice are tiny crustacean parasites, about the size of a small button. Now, in the wild, they tend to exist at quite low levels, but once all these salmon are packed into one pen, they explode, and their larvae and the lice do not stay in the nets. Now, and this is where it gets maybe a little bit politically messy. There is debate as to whether this is actually harmful for the salmon or not. The Marine Institute concluded that the effects of sea lice were actually quite minor and irregular. To counter that, IFI, or Inland Fisheries Ireland, had been doing research for over 18 years on this exact issue, and they found, according to them, that salmon smolt populations had drastically decreased about 18% since these farms had been spreading the sea lice. 18%. Now, if you're already starting with a 5% survival rate, adding an extra 18% on top of that is not helping anything. And here's what makes this so explosive. Minister Eamon Ryan in 2021, through a Freedom of Information request, wrote to the Agricultural Minister. He stated that the current regulatory system for aquaculture in Ireland was unsatisfactory and unsustainable. So we have Eamon Ryan, our Environment Minister, calling out our Agricultural Minister in writing over salmon, and our government is split wide open about this. And it's not just sea lice. When these farms get damaged by storms, they release the farmed salmon out into the wild. Farmed fish are genetically different. They're bred for growth and not for survival. There was even research published about this. The Proceedings of the Royal Society found out something very interesting. They found that the release of farmed fish actually doesn't increase the populations at all. You would think that maybe these fish would breed extra and there might be a different genetic pool brought into the mix, but actually, it diminishes the population. In 2017, large numbers of farmed salmon were turning up on the west coast of Ireland and in the rivers along that coast. The industry would argue that harm is contested. After all, they provide to the economy and they employ a lot of people around the country. And those jobs are real. But 12 salmon rivers in Ireland flow directly into where these farms are. And if the data and the science is saying that these farms are killing animals, and trust me, more and more peer-reviewed data is coming up about this, the law says authorities have an obligation to act. They haven't, not fully, and salmon are still dying. Back in 2007, the Irish government banned drift net fishing, and it caused a firestorm. Drift net fishermen were catching wild salmon at sea with big sea nets. During its peak, around 1974 and 75, over 1,400 tons of salmon was being landed annually. The angling lobby had been fighting this for decades and decades. The nets were intercepting fish that were going up to the rivers to spawn, killing mixed stocks indiscriminately. In 2007, the ban passed. The state offered €25 million in compensation to the estimated 877 licensed drift net fishermen. These were not wealthy proportions. Many made as little as €500 a year from salmon. These were part-time coastal fishermen, for whom salmon was just a seasonal supplement, and many of them felt that they were being absolutely scapegoated. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong to feel like that. But here is the uncomfortable truth about what happened next. The drift net ban passed, the fishermen got their compensation, the anglers celebrated, the salmon kept dying. In 1980, the marine survival of smolts was around 70%. Marine survival, or the percentage of smolts that are able to make their way out to the ocean and return, was around 20% in 1980. Today, it's approximately 5%. The collapse happened regardless of the drift net fishing. So were the commercial fishermen the villains? Were they scapegoated? It's a question that still burns a lot of coastal villages and settlements along the west coast of Ireland. The drift netters took the hit. The farms stayed open, the rivers stayed polluted, and the fish kept dying. Don't get me wrong, removing the drift nets was great for conservation. At this point, every fish matters, right? But it was never going to fix the problem on its own, and the government knew it. Now, I want to talk about something that I think barely gets mentioned when we're talking about Irish salmon. But I think it might be one of the most important pieces in this entire puzzle. 1973. Ireland joins the European Union, or the EU. At the time, it was the European Economic Community, but now it's the EU. And most people remember this as a really positive turning point in Irish history, which it was, but for the fishing industry, not so much. What happened next is something that still haunts Irish coastal communities to this day. The EU had already drawn up its common fishing rules, giving all member states equal access to all fishing waters. The unfortunate thing is this happened the morning before Ireland's application to join was officially received. And I'm not making that up. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. This meant that Ireland had no choice but to accept these terms, and the deal was done before they even had a chance to sit down at the table. And here's the staggering result about that. Ireland actually owns 15% of EU fishing waters, which is a pretty significant amount. We have one of the largest exclusive economic zones. Those are our water, full of our fish. However, the issue is Ireland is only allocated to 3.8% of its own fishing waters. Belgium, a country you couldn't even fit into Connacht, owns 80% of fishing waters in Ireland. How did this happen? Well, the quota system was based on historical catches from 1973, the year that Ireland joined. At that point, Ireland only had a tiny underdeveloped fishing fleet, small boats, modest catches, and that low baseline locked Ireland in permanently, while French, Spanish, and Danish industrial fleets all exploited the west coast of Irish waters. So what does this have to do with salmon? I'm sure you're asking the question. Those same industrial foreign trawlers aren't exactly specifically targeting salmon, but they are doing some significant damage to the entire marine ecosystem, in which the salmon depend on. Think about the sand eels and the blue whiting, which young salmon actively feed on when they're out in the open ocean. The food web in Irish Atlantic waters has been systematically stripped away for years and years and years, and it is not getting any better. Look at the timeline. 1975, the peak of Irish salmon. 1.76 million salmon return home to Irish rivers. That's also the last year before the Common Fisheries Policy fully bit and foreign industrial fleets took over and expanded through Irish waters. And the salmon numbers? Well, they started falling almost instantly. Correlation is not causation, but it is a question worth asking, and nobody was asking it. The Irish fishing industry has described the Common Fisheries Policy as unfair, as large bodies and big industrial fleets do what they want. They choose what happens. And Ireland has paid for this policy in fish for over 50 years. And nobody gave the salmon a seat at the negotiating table in 1973. Now, I have to talk about poaching, because whenever I talk about this subject, whether it's someone in the car park or someone on the fishing bank, poaching always comes up and seems to be the number one blame for the decline in our salmon. I want to give you my honest take on it, because I do have an opinion on this, as everyone else does. Poaching of salmon in Ireland is real. It's there, it's happening. And in the current state of our salmon stocks, every fish matters. So I'm not going to stand here and say it's fine, because it's not. Not right now. But here's the thing. 50 years ago, taking a salmon from a river illegally, filling a bag up overnight, sure, legally, it's not the right thing to do. But in terms of an actual impact on our salmon populations, with 1.76 million salmon coming back to our rivers annually, the poaching barely registered. The rivers were full. A few hundred, hell, even a few thousand fish wouldn't have even made an impact. The fish weren't declining because of poaching. They were declining despite the fact that the rivers were being heavily exploited and still are being heavily exploited, whether that was legal or illegal. So poaching didn't cause the collapse. Let me be absolutely clear on that, and it's something people need to be educated about. But here's where I land on it today. Today is completely different to the 1970s. We have rivers where there are perhaps a few dozen salmon left spawning, where every single fish matters, and these fish are genetically irreplaceable, where the difference between a river making a bounce back and seeing a population come back or seeing it completely diminish might come down to just one fish. In this context, taking salmon illegally is massive, and poaching is a huge problem. Every fish matters. So let me be clear. Poaching isn't the reason the fish are declining, but it is one more pressure on populations that have no margins left. And in 2026, with the stocks being at the level that they're at, this needs to be said. Right, seals and cormorants. Something that generates more heat in the Irish angling community than anything else. I'm convinced, and you cannot tell me otherwise. I actually made a video about cormorants, so if you're interested in checking that out, I'm gonna put it up either here or here. So please feel free to have a look at that. It's very interesting. I just go into the sort of the depth of cormorants and how they're impacting Ireland, whether or not they are impacting fish stocks. So if that's something you're interested in, please go have a look. Anyways, let's carry on. I want to address the argument about seals and cormorants. I've met people on the bank who have certain perspectives, and I've even had arguments with people in fishing groups who have different perspectives. It's the seals, it's the cormorants, you can't catch a fish without a seal following it up. It's the same thing every single time. And I completely understand why anglers feel this way. Seal numbers have genuinely increased since seal protection laws came into place. Cormorant populations have dramatically expanded, and both of these species do eat salmon. No one is disputing these facts. But here's my honest position on this, and some of you are not going to like this. I get that. Seals have been in Irish coastal areas and Irish estuaries for thousands and thousands of years. Cormorants have been fishing Irish river systems for years before the very first human even picked up a rod. These animals are not invasive species. They are native to Ireland, and they have been part of this fragile ecosystem along with the salmon for millennia. For most of history, salmon numbers have been so high that predation by seals and cormorants has just been part of the system. Just Mother Nature doing her thing. A natural pressure that the salmon population could just absorb. No problem. I mean, salmon have evolved to produce thousands and thousands of eggs for this very reason. Not every fish is going to be able to survive. That is the circle of life. So the problem is not that seals and cormorants have become so oppressive and predatory all of a sudden. The issue is that salmon numbers have declined so much that now even seals and cormorants are impacting the numbers even more. Once again, adding another pressure. Are seals and cormorants helping the situation right now? No, they're not. Should wildlife managers be targeting predation and maybe taking action against this? Yeah, in my view, I think that they should. But are they the reason that wild Atlantic salmon are disappearing? Absolutely not. They are a native part of a broken ecosystem. Ecosystem that we broke. Humans. And pointing our fingers at seals and cormorants while our rivers stay polluted with agricultural runoff and the farmed nets continue to stay open are the exact distractions that let the real reasons off the hook. Now, here's the hardest truth to the whole story. Even if we clean up every river in Ireland today, even if we knock down every weir, even if we stop the poaching, even if we close down the salmon farms, even if we ban the drift nets again, just to protect the wildlife, we might still lose the wild Atlantic salmon. Because the most catastrophic thing that is actually happening to these incredible fish is happening so far out in the open ocean that we cannot even help. So here's what we know. A young salmon smolt leaves an Irish river and makes its incredible journey out into the open Atlantic Ocean, somewhere out in the Norwegian Sea, thousands and thousands of miles away. This is so that it can feed and grow for 1 to 3 years before it returns home to spawn in the exact river where it hatched. Now, in order to survive this entire journey, they need food. Salmon rely on sand eels and blue whiting, as I previously mentioned, when they're very young. And Those fish, the sand eels and blue whiting, feed on zooplankton. The Missing Salmon Alliance did a 60-year study, and this included rivers such as the Corrib here in Ireland. The data is pretty drastic. Over the last 6 decades, the North Atlantic has seen a drastic decline in zooplankton energy. Less zooplankton means less food for the smaller fish. Less smaller fish means more starving juvenile salmon, and starving juvenile salmon means that there are less salmon returning to Irish rivers at all. And what is causing this zooplankton decline, you're probably asking? Well, it's climate change. It's global warming. And there's another problem brewing with the changes of the temperatures in the ocean, and that is the Pacific pink salmon, an invasive species of salmon that has been consistently on and off appearing in Irish rivers. Pink salmon compete with Atlantic salmon for the same food. Back in June 2024, there was a NASCO conference held in County Mayo. At this conference, the pink salmon was flagged as an emerging threat to the already pressured Atlantic salmon. Ireland is a small island on the edge of the Atlantic. We cannot single-handedly stop the ocean's warming. We cannot control the zooplankton collapse. We can't stop the pink salmon from spreading. These are global problems that are requiring international coordination. And the people most passionate about saving the wild Atlantic salmon find this the most heartbreaking part. Because you can ban the farms, you can stop the runoff, and you can break down the weirs. You can make a video essay about poaching and EU quotas, but how do you fight the temperature of the Norwegian Sea? So, is it hopeless? I don't think so, and I want to tell you why. First, we have the barrier removal program. As I mentioned earlier in this video, IFI have said that they are going to be spending 110 million euro on the removal of barriers for the wild Atlantic salmon throughout our river systems. Opening up even a few kilometers of previously blocked or dammed areas can really help these salmon get to the spots that they need to in order to spawn. I cannot even begin to tell you the amount of times I've seen spent salmon above a weir, so close to the ocean. Honestly, nowhere near where it should be spawning. However, it has exerted so much energy getting up these dams, weirs, and barriers that it is now unable to continue its journey. So this is my call to IFI to follow through on what they've said they will do. Time will tell, so the ball's in your court, IFI. Secondly, I'd like to talk about water quality and why this could change. Ireland has legally binding EU obligations to improve water quality. Progress has been slow, but political and legal pressure has been put on the current government to change laws. And this isn't coming from the people now, this is coming from the EU, which the Irish government seem to listen to most of the time. Unlike the people, unlike us, they don't listen to us as much. So more investment in wastewater treatment and agricultural regulation is supposedly coming. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about land-based salmon farms. Now, I spoke about the open salmon farms, big pens out in the ocean. IFI have stated that they want to transition away from farming salmon out in the open ocean and move it onto big land-based farms, which has been done before in other countries. Norway has shown that this is possible and that the technology exists. By doing this, we significantly eliminate the spread of sea lice, which drastically affects our smolt. Fourth, I want to talk about the angling community. Where there is a will, there is a way. Every club that is practicing catch and release, every club that is restoring a gravel pit or reporting a pollution problem, these may seem like small things, but they really matter. Irish anglers have historically been some of the best environmental guardians that this country has. That tradition has to continue. Here's what I keep coming back to. The drift net fishermen blamed the anglers blamed the farms blamed the climate change, the government blamed everyone and reformed nothing fast enough. Anglers blamed the seals, and the whole time the salmon kept dying. The truth that everyone has to face eventually is that this is a multi-front crisis. The rivers are poisoned, the migration routes are blocked, the farms are spreading lice into wild Irish corridors, the EU handed our Irish waters to foreign fleets, the ocean is warming, and yes, in the past, many fish were taken from the open ocean. There is no single villain, but there is a single victim. And that victim is one of the most extraordinary animals on this planet. An animal that hatches in an Irish mountain stream, then travels thousands and thousands of miles into open ocean using forces that we still don't fully understand, only to return years later to spawn in the exact same gravel bed, sometimes spawning feet away from where it originally hatched itself. That fish carries something in its body that we should consider so sacred. And right now, we are presiding over its disappearance. Not through malice, but through the slow accumulation of decisions made by farmers, fishermen, politicians, and all of us consumers of the environment. I'm a fisherman. I love this sport, and I love these rivers, and I love our ocean. And I'm telling you, if we don't change course significantly, the wild Atlantic salmon will functionally disappear from Irish rivers in our lifetime. Not as a metaphor, as a fact. So, what do you think? What's the biggest killer of wild salmon in Ireland? The farms? The rivers? The EU? Is it climate change, poaching, seals, cormorants? Or is it something that I missed entirely? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. It's definitely something I've been thinking of talking about for a while. I'm so passionate about this sport and fishing as a whole. I'm really enjoying making these videos, and I hope you guys are enjoying them as well. If you have anything to say at all, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me this week. See y'all next week.